They left the cocoon of Nina's dressing room and made their way to the soundstage, which was outfitted with cooking stations, KitchenAid mixers, multiple burners, mixing bowls, measuring cups, and an alphabetized spice rack. The setup wasn't dissimilar from her own restaurant's kitchen, except for the reality show part. Nina carefully ran a finger along the top of her forehead. She was sweating. And not just because of the bright overhead lights or the row of cameras that would soon be trained on her. Sharp footsteps approached the soundstage, and Nina turned to see the real source of her jitters. Leo O'Donnell. Her co-host on the show was as annoying as a piece of spinach lodged in between her front teeth. He wasn't a chef. He was a businessman, and his only accomplishment was turning his father's charming Italian restaurant, Vinny's, into a bland chain. Unlike Nina, he wasn't passionate about food. All he cared about was the bottom line. She just needed to make it through this taping, ideally without screaming at him. If she accomplished that, then they could go back to doing what they did best, hating each other. However, not yelling would be difficult, because Leo, aka the person whose face she pictured when she needed to pound out some dough, always knew how to provoke the worst in her. After tonight, though, the show would wrap for the season. She'd return to the day-to-day running of her restaurant and trade in bowls of prop food for the real thing. Instead of working with Leo, where she had to control her gag reflex, she'd be in the kitchen with Jasmine. Just the thought of her old routine was like a warm cup of cocoa, comforting and extremely necessary. As much as Nina loved mentoring the budding chefs and working with the insanely talented behind-the-scenes crew, she needed the time off. From Leo, the man-child, to be more specific. A stylist soundlessly appeared at Nina's side and worked on the unruly flyaways that always erupted from her head under the heat of the on-camera lighting, while a man with a compact dabbed over her forehead. "How's my hair and makeup?" Leo stopped and cocked his chin at the exact angle for the overhead light to accentuate his immaculate swoop of dark hair. It was as if someone had marked with an X the exact spot for him to stand so he'd look his absolute best. He was close to being 6 feet tall and carried himself in an overly confident way that gave him even more height. He wore a crisp white shirt, unbuttoned just enough to reveal the faintest whiff of his chest hair, a touch she'd bet $100 that he'd made, and not the stylist. As he came to stand next to her, he studied her face. "Are you sweating?" he finally asked. "What?" Of course he'd noticed. "No!" She self-consciously touched her hairline again. The makeup person gave him a once-over and smiled. "You're set." Nina rolled her eyes. One of his many flaws was that he was physically flawless. The kind of man who only got right swipes and never had to pay for a drink in his life. And if anyone claimed they weren't attracted to him, well, they'd be lying. Like people who said they hated cake. Liars. Even Nina would never deny that he was handsome in a certain light, if you squinted hard enough. Luckily, his habit of playfully undercutting her canceled out any urges she might have toward him. "It's a good thing they can get your hair big enough to hide the witch hat." Leo absent-mindedly rolled up the cuff of his shirt, like he hadn't even noticed she was there. Nina ignored how seeing a hint of his skin made her mouth twitch, just slightly. "Stop drooling." "Don't you want to use a little powder to take the shine off his cloven hooves?" Nina asked the makeup person. But she couldn't help but notice that Leo's lips twinged at her comment. "We're back in 60?" Tiffany called out loudly to the crew, then turned to Nina. "Should I be worried?" "If he can play nice, I will too." Nina eyed Leo, who either didn't hear her or, more likely, chose to tune her out. She understood why Tiffany was twitching, just like everyone else on set. For the first time in the history of the show's 3 seasons, they were taping live. A ploy to boost the ratings, which had been steadily declining thanks to all the new reality shows cropping up, or so the network executives had explained. They needed to attract viewers to remain on the air and stay relevant.